1 hour ago, Tupac saw through Diddy before anyone else. Now his words are evidence. Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. What follows is not entertainment. It's not even history. It's testimony raw, unreleased, and for decades suppressed. Until now. It was a packed federal courtroom. Attorneys scribbling notes, reporters checking feeds. Nobody knew what was about to play. Then a speaker clicked, and Tupac's voice filled the room. Not a song, not a freestyle, a confession, a warning, a prophecy. It was a never-before-heard interview from 1996, just weeks before his death. For years, it had been locked away, buried by someone with enough pull to keep it dead. Until now. And in the center of the storm, once again stood one man, Diddy. The audio was clear. Tupac in his own cadence, speaking not like a rapper, but like a witness. They let him wear your colors, he said. When it benefits New York, he's the king. When it doesn't, he's just another rapper. He never says Diddy's name directly, but everyone knew who he meant. In that 2-hour interview, only 10 minutes ever aired. Angie Martinez said it was to avoid violence. But today, in court, that reason collapsed. Because according to Gene Deal, Diddy's former head of security, Angie didn't pull the tape. Diddy did. Back in '96, Diddy was more than a mogul. He was a force. Gene Deal testified that Diddy controlled Hot 97 from the shadows. Not with ownership, with influence. Enough to bury a tape that could have burned down his empire. Pac wasn't paranoid, Deal said. He was prophetic. The jury leaned in. Reporters froze. The courtroom wasn't just hearing history. It was reliving a cover-up. Tupac described the industry like a rigged game. He's not respected, Pac said. He's feared. He didn't talk about labels. He talked about power, manipulation, obedience disguised as opportunity. And he saw it early. Y'all let him in, Pac warned. And now he owns the room. What sounded like beef back then now sounded like testimony. Then came the name that shifted the room again. Monique. She wasn't expected to testify. But when she stepped onto the stand, something changed. She brought documents, dates, audio, and one cold sentence. They didn't protect Diddy because they believed in him. They protected their seats at the table. She pointed to names: Tyler Perry, Oprah, executives, media gatekeepers. They weren't passive, she said. They were complicit. It wasn't just about Diddy anymore. It was about the machine behind him. Earlier in the trial, Cassie Ventura described the parties, the cameras, the rituals. You weren't invited into Diddy's world, she said. You were absorbed by it, phones taken, boundaries erased, choices illusions. She described red velvet rooms, silence as currency, and a man who didn't just want attention, he wanted obedience. Then came Gene Deal, a man who once stood at Diddy's side. Today, he stood against him. You weren't protecting anything, he told Diddy. You were hiding everything. He described watching Diddy listen to the Angie Martinez interview, called it damaging dangerous, and confirmed Diddy ordered it buried. Why? Because Pac had drawn a map, and if the world had followed it, Diddy's empire wouldn't have made it out of the 90s. Deal went further. He described Diddy's obsession with Tupac, not as rivalry, as mimicry. He copied Pac's clothes, his speech, his women. He didn't want to beat him. He wanted to be him, Deal said. But it was the envy that turned strategic. He didn't build an empire on talent, Deal told the jury. He built it on surveillance, on silence, on fear. And then came the words that turned stomachs. You remember what you told me? Deal asked Diddy. You said Pac talks too much. And one day, someone's gonna shut him up. A chill moved through the courtroom. For years, Tupac's murder has been a mystery. Today it was reframed, not as gang retaliation, as warning. This wasn't just one man's downfall, it was a network. Parties, contracts, NDAs, Young dancers kept close, stories buried, voices erased, and Tupac. He saw it. He studied it. He tried to name it. And the moment he did, he became the first target. As the courtroom reeled, the prosecution wasn't done. There were more tapes, more testimonies, and deeper questions. Because Tupac didn't just warn us about Diddy. He warned us about the system that made him untouchable. And the question rising now isn't whether Diddy controlled too much. It's whether he silenced the only man brave enough to say so. Court resumed under a different kind of tension. Not noise, stillness. The kind that fills a room when something unspoken has finally been said. Because what the jury had heard yesterday wasn't just a hidden tape or a buried truth, it was a blueprint. And today, that blueprint was being unrolled in public. Tupac's warnings weren't isolated, they were early signals in a system now being dissected in real time. Monique called it an ecosystem of complicity. Not just one man at the top, but layers. Gatekeepers, enablers, executives who didn't host the parties but protected the ones who did. They weren't silent, she said. They were strategic. She named names, not for drama, for accountability. Diddy wasn't the disease, she said. He was the symptom. Back in 1996, Suge Knight said Pac had started asking the wrong questions. Why was this executive in every room? Why were so many young artists locked in bad contracts? Why did people go missing from conversations? At first, Pac thought it was paranoia. Then patterns emerged. Whispers, odd phone calls, smiles that didn't match the energy. And then came the line that stopped everything. Something ain't right about Puff. Only 10 minutes of that 2-hour interview ever saw the light of day. Angie claimed she withheld it to prevent violence. But according to Gene Deal, it wasn't her decision. It was Diddy's. He didn't own the station, Gene said. He owned the fear. The full tape allegedly laid bare more than just rap beef. It revealed a hidden power structure. A system Tupac saw and tried to expose. The courtroom began to understand the depth. This wasn't just about fame. It was about filtration. Diddy's empire prosecutors argued was a machine designed to decide who could speak and who stayed silent. Artists weren't groomed, they were filtered. Contracts used as cages. Parties as proving grounds. Obedience as the currency of survival. Unexpected. Unannounced. But when Will Smith took the stand, the gallery froze. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He just told the truth. I wasn't invited to that party, he said. I was trapped in it. He described his own experience of being welcomed into Diddy's circle. At first, it felt like networking. Then the shift came. Cameras, pressure, unspoken rules. You're not joining, he said. You're being initiated. We'll describe surveillance. Footage saved, moments twisted. Reality isn't fixed in that world, he said. It's edited. He told the court about leverage. Diddy didn't need to blackmail people with scandal. He had footage. Footage no one ever consented to. Footage that kept people in line. Gene returned to the stand to fill in the blanks. Diddy didn't need guns, he said. He had access. He had a network. He had silence. And when Tupac started connecting the dots between Andre Harrell, Uptown Records, dancers, producers, things escalated. Pac believed Diddy wasn't the end of the story. He was the beginning. A gatekeeper for something bigger. Gene's voice cracked once. They didn't just want Pac gone, he said. They wanted what he stood for gone. The gallery stopped breathing. Pac wasn't feared for what he said. He was feared for what he saw. For asking questions. For connecting the music to money. For understanding the machine. He told friends, if we know something, we gotta speak. He planned to go public. Not to shame, to protect. But he never got the chance. Because the more he uncovered, the more dangerous he became. He wasn't just calling out a mogul. He was cracking the code. and someone decided it was time to shut him down. The court hadn't even touched the Quad Studio shooting yet, or the most chilling theory of all. That Tupac's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a message. Because when you try to dismantle a silence engine, you become its first casualty. The courtroom held its breath, because what came next was no longer theory. It was logistics, timelines, floor plans, footsteps, and a moment that changed hip-hop forever. November 30th, 1994. Quad Recording Studios. The night that changed everything. Tupac arrived at the Manhattan studio for what should have been a routine session. But nothing that night was routine. He stepped into the lobby. Seconds later, gunfire. He was shot 5 times. Robbed, left bleeding. And from that hospital bed, he already knew. This wasn't random. The unspoken silence. After the shooting, the silence was deafening. Diddy and Biggie were upstairs. They didn't visit. They didn't call. They just kept moving. Tupac took note. That silence spoke louder than any denials. It didn't confirm guilt. It confirmed strategy. Who shot? Ya soon after Diddy dropped a track. Who shot ya? He claimed it was recorded before the shooting. Tupac didn't buy it. He heard the message. Not lyrical, tactical. Stay quiet, or next time you don't get back up. Gene Deal behind the scenes. Gene Deal returned to the witness stand. He said the aftermath inside Bad Boy was eerie. Some people were scared, some laughed, but no one acted surprised. That was the moment, he said, when Diddy's shadow stopped following Tupac. It started hunting him. From rival to suspect, Tupac didn't call it beef anymore. He called it betrayal. He watched Diddy's empire grow while death row wobbled. He realized the industry didn't just allow it, it needed it. Pac later said, "That night taught me the real rules." And the biggest one, danger doesn't always come from your enemies. Sometimes it wears your old jersey. Pac's power versus Diddy's obsession. Pac had something Diddy could never buy: authenticity. The streets followed him. The people believed him. He walked into a room and it changed. And Diddy. He studied it, copied it, tried to become it. Mimicry to malice. Gene Deal described the shift. Versace fits, speeches, mannerisms, even a Grammy acceptance speech lifted line for line. It started as admiration. It became obsession. And then it turned dark. Kim Porter and the Control Spiral rumors say Kim Porter admired Pac's fire. And Diddy knew it. Their relationship sources say soured every time Pac's name came up. This wasn't romance. It was territory. Pac joked about it once. That man wants to be me so bad he might hurt himself. But no one laughed. Because behind the smile was surveillance. And behind the music, a plan. The face of the silence engine. This was never about beef. It was about monopoly. Pac was trying to expose a system. Diddy was trying to preserve it. And Pac realized too late he wasn't challenging a man. He was challenging a machine. What the tape didn't say. What the trial did, Tupac's words were buried, but his instincts. They're all over this trial. Manipulation, envy, fear turned into leverage, power used like currency, and silence as policy. The jury still hadn't heard the full story of the Martinez tape, or the pieces of evidence Diddy allegedly ordered destroyed. And most haunting of all, they hadn't reached the moment Tupac warned would come when the music stops. And the truth plays instead. By day 15, the court wasn't just listening to witnesses. They were looking for ghosts. The Angie Martinez interview had become the central mystery. Not just because of what was on it, but because of what it proved. That Tupac tried to say something the world wasn't ready to hear, and someone made sure it stayed that way. The ghost interview. 2 hours long, only 10 minutes ever released. Angie said the rest was too explosive, too risky. She feared it would ignite a coast-to-coast war, but under oath her story shifted. I didn't make that call, she said. I was told to hold it. By who? One name. Diddy. Controlling the airwaves. Gene Deal confirmed it. He heard the full tape, he said. He called it uncontrollable, and in one phone call, the rest disappeared. He didn't own Hot 97, but he didn't need to. He owned the fear. The missing minutes. What was on the tape? Witnesses who'd heard it described Tupac laying out the game. He named names, described setups disguised as rap beef, exposed payouts, disappearing dancers, private surveillance, and at the center of it, Diddy. Not as a rapper, as an operator. More cult leader than mogul. He wants to own your voice. One quote stood out. He doesn't just want you to follow him, Pac said. He wants to own your voice. The courtroom didn't move, because in that line, everything clicked. The contracts, the parties, the loyalty tests. It wasn't management, it was ownership. The corporate connection Pac took it further. He tied record labels to prison systems. Rap about drugs and murder. You get funding, he said. Try to uplift. Suddenly the budget's gone. He believed young black men were being funneled from studios to cages, and the same companies were cashing checks both ways. The silence was by design. Pac wasn't silenced by chaos. He was silenced by strategy. NDAs. Partnerships. A media ecosystem built to protect profit, not truth. That's why the tape vanished. Because it wasn't just dangerous, it was accurate. A system of filtering. The prosecution argued Diddy's world wasn't about inclusion, it was about filtration. You didn't get in unless you passed the test. Cassie failed when she started asking questions. Will Smith failed when he said no. Monique failed when she refused silence. And Tupac. He failed because he saw the blueprint and said it out loud. The boardroom. Not the booth. Pac warned about the real bosses. The money doesn't end at Bad Boy, he said. It ends in the boardroom. This wasn't about beef. It was about infrastructure. Who benefits from the chaos? Not the artists, not the fans, not the people. The hidden architects. Monique's testimony hinted at bigger names, executives, politicians, media heads, people who never touched the mess, but collected from it. Pac said Diddy's just the gatekeeper. The real architects are behind the glass. And now, the glass was cracking. The trial wasn't done, but it was shifting. From questions of abuse to questions of design. And the more Pac's words resurfaced, the clearer it became. He didn't just die too soon, he spoke too early. And now, the world is finally listening. By the third week of trial, no one was asking if Diddy made mistakes. They were asking how many of them were calculated, how much of this was scandal, and how much was structure. Because what started with whispers had now become a map. In Tupac, he left breadcrumbs everywhere. The question that changed everything. It wasn't just about contracts anymore, or blackmail, or parties behind velvet curtains. The question hanging over the courtroom was simple. Did Diddy have anything to do with Tupac's murder? For years, it was just conspiracy. Today, it's part of sworn testimony. Patterns emerge. Cassie testified to being absorbed into Diddy's world. Monique showed how high the cover-up went. Gene Deal described surveillance mimicry, obsession. Will Smith admitted he didn't feel invited, he felt trapped, and Tupac. He warned them all, long before the courtrooms, before the headlines. He said, I'm being followed, not by gangs, but by insiders. The Vegas night reconsidered, September 1996. Las Vegas. Tupac is gunned down, a moment the world saw as street violence. But what if it wasn't? What if it was a message? A demonstration of what happens when you know too much and say it anyway. Not paranoia. Premonition in Pac wasn't spiraling. He was studying. He read contracts, studied patterns, watched who rose, who vanished. He noticed how silence got rewarded, and how rebellion got buried. From music to machinery. This wasn't just a rap trial anymore. It was an indictment of infrastructure. A machine that used music as bait, that fed chaos to young black audiences while profiting quietly on the back end. Pac said it best: they don't care about the art. They care about owning the artist. The system fights back. And when an artist refused to be owned, he didn't get banned, he got erased. That's what Pac feared. Not just death, disappearance, not just being shot, being forgotten. Courtroom reality. The jury listened to voices from decades ago, heard tapes never meant to surface, and saw the cost of truth. Because truth in this world doesn't just hurt careers, it ends them. The real question, not was Diddy guilty, but how did we let him become untouchable for this long? And worse, who's protecting the next Diddy? Because the system didn't collapse when Pac died. It grew stronger in the silence. A hero. We ignored. Tupac never called himself a savior, but he acted like one. He told the truth when it was dangerous. He mapped out power when everyone else was distracted. And now, nearly 30 years later, we see the prophecy. Diddy didn't just represent a mogul. He represented the machine. Pac was the first to say it, and the first to pay for it. One juror reportedly whispered as the courtroom adjourned. He wasn't paranoid. He was early. The trial isn't over, but something already is. The era where silence was safer, where truth got buried, and the powerful stayed hidden. That's ending. Because the man they tried to erase just became the most important voice in the room. They thought it would end with testimony, with cameras off, files sealed, and headlines fading. But it didn't, because something bigger had shifted, and not even the courtroom could contain it. After the stand, when the last witness stepped down, the silence wasn't relief. It was realization. This wasn't just a trial of a man. It was the first crack in a wall built decades high. The wall of culture, celebrity, and control. Of power that smiled for cameras, but whispered orders in shadows. And the first name to break through that wall wasn't a lawyer or a prosecutor. It was Tupac, dead nearly 30 years, but suddenly more alive than ever. The internet woke up. The courtroom sparked it, but the internet spread it. Clips of Pac's interview leaked in fragments. Hashtags trended. Comment sections turned into archives of memory and rage. People started asking new questions. Why did only 10 minutes air? Why did no one protect him? Why did Diddy's rise coincide with Pac's silencing? And how many more tapes have we never heard? The industry reacts executives who once posed with Diddy suddenly turned quiet. Old interviews resurfaced. Videos once dismissed as conspiracy were now reframed as documentation. Some artists deleted old collabs. Others posted cryptic lines. But one tweet stood out. He was right. We all knew. We just hoped he was wrong. Victims or survivors: Cassie, Monique, Jean, Will. They weren't just testifying. They were surviving. Because when the system you're speaking against owns the microphone, every sentence is a risk. But now that risk was contagious. More witnesses came forward. Behind closed doors, studios scrambled. Crisis PR firms worked overtime. Because what used to be crazy talk was now federal testimony. The culture recalibrates. Tupac once said, "They'll give you fame to shut you up." Now that quote hit differently. Because the world saw what happened when someone refused the silence. And it didn't feel heroic, it felt tragic. Pac didn't die because he was a gangster. He died because he was a threat. To power, to profit, to the illusion. What happens next? Prosecutors hinted at more charges. Unsealed documents are pending, subpoenas are expanding, and new names are on the edge of exposure. Because if this was a system, it didn't stop with Diddy. He was just the loudest conductor of a silent orchestra. And now that orchestra is off key. For years, Tupac's death was sold as chaos. a product of ego, of beef. But now it reads like assassination, of a voice that got too clear, a mind that got too curious, a man who refused to let the beat drown out the truth. The last words of the unearthed interview haven't been made public. But insiders say Tupac closed with a message. If they kill me, know that it wasn't because of what I said. It's because of what they couldn't stop me from saying next. And now, after decades of silence, what comes next is louder than ever. This isn't closure, it's reckoning. And the industry, it's finally on trial too.